What companies deserve your hard-earned dollar? Which would you want to work for? How can you know if they share your values? Just ask us. Just Capital is a nonprofit that tracks who really means business in supporting workers, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. We measure progress, track success, and help them be better. When you see the Just Capital seal, you know what's real, because just business is better business. Visit justcapital.com to learn who makes your dollar count.
Good afternoon. We are doing it live here in the 4 o'clock hour on 790 KBC, doing more in 2024, just like the stock market. We do it live here in the 4 o'clock hour now. Mottek On Money, live on the air on 790 KBC, streaming live online worldwide at kbc.com and the on-demand Mottek On Money podcast at kbc.com, Apple, iTunes, and all your favorite podcast platforms. Make that AI, the big story this week, with NVIDIA leading the stock market to record highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 hit new record highs today at the close, and the mega-cap chip maker NVIDIA extended its rally, getting closer to $800 a share. We see the Dow coming in for a closing gain of 62 points. The S&P 500 closed up just about 2 points, both enough to bring both of those averages to all-time closing highs. The NASDAQ flirted with record highs today above 16,000, but ended a bit lower, down 45 points to settle just below 16K at 15,997. It was a winning week with some big days this past week. It was a holiday-shortened week, too. We had President's Day to kick off the week on Monday when the market was closed. But over these past 4 trading days, we've seen the Dow gain 1.3%, the S&P 500 moved at 1.7%, and the NASDAQ advanced 1.4% despite today's modest pullback. NVIDIA, of course, the star of the week, a meteoric rise in that stock, makes it not only the third largest company in America now in terms of market cap, but also bigger than most other countries' economies based on GDP, gross domestic product. Yep, you heard me. NVIDIA really taking the spotlight here. NVIDIA is now worth more than the GDP of every country except 11 big ones, bigger than the economy of Russia, for example. Taking a look at an NVIDIA stock today, it moved up nearly another $3 to $788.17 at the close. We'll be taking a closer look at this big story coming up here shortly and what an American success story that is. Meanwhile, the other big tech companies, including some of the Magnificent Seven, including NVIDIA, as well as Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta Platforms, Tesla. Most of those names moved lower today. We did see Warner Brothers Discovery in the media space tumbling nearly 10% on a disappointing earnings report. Carvana shares coming to life here, going in the high gear, soaring more than 32% after reporting a narrower quarterly loss than Wall Street had expected. That stock had been hammered over the past year. Some state lawmakers in Sacramento now working to essentially legalize racial discrimination here in California, despite the passage in 1997 of Prop 209, which said the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Something called Assembly Constitutional Amendment Number 7 is now being considered. I'll discuss what that's all about with attorney Jack Brown, an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. He'll be joining me live later this hour. And what are the U.S. Senate candidates here in California going to do about crime and homelessness? Let's bring in one of those candidates, Christina Pascucci, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, humanitarian, Southern California pilot, expectant mom, and candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat previously held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. Christina Pascucci will be joining me live later this hour. But first, on your money, the markets and the economy to wrap up this record-shattering week for the stock market. Joining us live now is investment expert Brian Perry, Chief Investment Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Mint Asset Management at mintassetmanagement.com and author of the 25% Cash Machine. Good afternoon to you, Brian. Looks like that good old cash machine got cranked up again in a big way this week.
Certainly did, Frank. It was well-oiled. Coming into the week here, big expectations with NVIDIA's earnings on deck, and the company did not disappoint, as you noted, and certainly it was a pivotal moment for the market here, because had it gone wrong, then certainly that would have triggered a lot of knee-jerk selling here, but instead quite the opposite. So the market held on to its big Thursday gains here today, pretty much on lower than the average volume, which is a nice way to consolidate after such a big day yesterday. Good breadth, too, on the week. You had about 3-to-1 advancers leading decliners. So you see a market that's trying to broaden out here. Is really what we want to see. So it's just not all about the the big Mag 7 and FANG on that. So there's roughly $7 trillion on the sideline in cash and cash equivalents, which is really this is kind of making this the most hated rally of all time. And when in fact it's one of the best rallies of all time right now, Frank, and that's got people really in a fix because they're camped out in 5% money markets, and there was a very few people on Wall Street that did not call for a recession here in the first quarter or the second quarter of this year, did not materialize, and now they're in the moment of what do you do? The market's made a big move here, and you're sitting in a lot of cash. You're getting 5, but you're missing out on a 20% move, possibly, for the course of the year. I think this is going to, it's going to be a quandary for a lot of people if you don't get a big pullback here that are going to have to be forced into this market here. The S&P, it looks to want a challenge here, 5,200 here. We closed at 5,089 today. We tagged 5,100 here during the course of the day. And that's probably over the near term here. The people give these year-end targets, but they tend to be realized beforehand. And this is driven by what is becoming a very real AI experience here. The reality of AI is starting to monetize, and NVIDIA brought that to bear today, along with other companies in the same space that are starting to say, guess what, guys, wake up. This is for real. This is as big as the internet, back in the late 1990s. So, and there's a lot of people that are in denial of this that really have not, warmed up to the whole idea that AI is going to start impacting multiple industries in a big way. So, the market it's finding other places to also trade on also here, other than the Mag 7 and FANG. Leadership is being seen in some healthcare names like Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk and Merck, breaking out to the upside. Industrials like Eaton and Caterpillar and Ingersoll Rand and Union Pacific. And these stocks can move the needle, not nearly as the big mega techs, but it does bring evidence to the market that it's just not all about just those names. And the S&P Global U.S. Manufacturing PMI, which kind of measures the health of factory output around the world, that came in at 51.5 today. That's a good number. And again, goes against the grain of everybody thinking there's a global recession on the cusp here. So that reflects a good pickup in factory production, and the market is really it's extended here over maybe the week or two, but it's really not historically overbought as in terms of when you compare it to the benchmarks here, because margin debt stands at around $700 billion, which is certainly below the $950 to $1 trillion markers that would really identify as an overbought market here. Investor sentiment is still very cautious here, and to some extent somewhat negative on a lot of gauges here. Outside FANG and Mag 7, the market trades at 15 times earnings here. So you have an elevated PE, which is dominated by these big cap tech names, but underneath that, the rest of the S&P is trading at between a 5 and 10 year historical average fair value. So on that note, it's not overvalued here, and responding well to the notion that the Fed rate cuts may not happen, between now and May or June here, if at all, for the rest of the year here. So the market's starting to buy into the fact that, well, we can live in this particular rate world as long as the economy's perking along at the clip that it is. And if and when it does happen, where the Fed does start to, telegraph that they're going to start to lower rates, then you get a real broadening out of the market here, where the small caps and mid caps, and that'll be led by the industrials, which is called the cyclical trade. For those out there that are wondering, when does the big industrial trade happen? That'll start to happen when it becomes, very notable that the Fed is going to start to lower rates here. So, with that in mind, the Russell 2000, it's holding above its 2000 level here, is a key indicator for what might be a bullish liftoff area for the second half of the year, because it has lagged. The S&P is trading at a 44% premium to the Russell 2000. So that could be the biggest catch-up trade in recent history if, in fact, the Fed does start to lower rates, because the Russell's been bogged down by a lot of bank exposure and higher interest rates at this time. But that could be a slingshot move here in the second half of the year. Frank?
On the Air Live with investment expert Brian Perry with Mint Asset Management. And Brian, thank you for that always excellent assessment of things here. at the moment, and they're calling, we've heard, of course, about the Magnificent Seven. They're calling NVIDIA the Magnificent One, given what's happened recently, and at record highs here. Now, NVIDIA, I see, closed up nearly $3 today. It's $7.88. Remember, one of the big Wall Street firms had a $700 price target on it before the earnings report came out, and it blew past 700, and now some are saying 800. Where do you see NVIDIA go from here?
Well, it probably goes higher here, Frank, because it's really only trading at, the numbers are compelling. It's really not expensive, relatively speaking. In fact, it's fairly valued to Intel, for crying out loud, because the earnings are ramping up so fast right now. It's trading at, with the possibility of 25 to 30 times, earnings per share going forward. The stock is incredible. They're doing all the right things. They gave great guidance going forward here. You wonder when AMD and the other chip makers are going to, really be able to get in there. When, Microsoft talked about maybe getting into making their chips, their own chips in house this week. That didn't stop NVIDIA from powering higher. So it's a one man's, show right now, and that's NVIDIA. It's theirs to own. AMD's chips won't even be out till later this year, really, to compete with NVIDIA. And so, therefore, as long as the hyperscalers, that build these data centers are having to revolutionize these data centers to take on AI, which is what's happening right now. It's theirs to basically own, and they do own it here. So I'm seeing the stock at 800 here. I think this is one of those trades where you buy some to keep and you trade some, because I trimmed a little bit today, just above $800 a share, because it made such a bold move. And then, the stock does breathe heavy. So, you could see the stock back down in the low 700s here on some headline, who knows. But you have a stock here that really looks like it's going to propel itself here higher over the longer term until there's another game-changing chip maker out there that's going to start to steal their thunder.
A lot of people breathing heavy over this NVIDIA move. Absolutely. Now, let me ask you this. One company that got a lot of attention this week on that moon landing, Intuitive Machines. We see the stock moving lower here after hours, after getting a pop of 16%, after the company's chief executive says its moon lander had come down on its side. The stock was down 20% to $7 and change in after-hours trading today, following a 16% rise at the close. According to MarketWatch, Intuitive Machines CEO said at a news conference with NASA that the company believed the lander's foot caught on the surface of the moon when coming in for a landing, causing it to end up on its side. Quite an achievement there, but unfortunately, looks like it's on its side, and the stock went cattywampus in after-hours trading today.
Well, these are companies that people want to be on the early stage of. It's a $10 stock. It's closed at 9.59 today, after being up as high as like 11.85. And, who doesn't want to be on the next big thing, out there when it comes to any of these types of young, early stage plays here. So, they operate, and they're in the space systems and infrastructure business here for, and this is kind of the Elon Musk type area here where, you want to start wondering whether or not we're going to start building labs and housing and other types of resource facilities on the moon and other places here. So this always brings a tremendous amount of speculation and ride sharing back and forth to the moon and taking global trips around the Earth just to for pleasure. That's all well and good, but you got to be careful here because you want to make sure that that these people are like well embedded that are running these companies here, and if apparently they've got some people from NASA that are in this particular company here, and that brings some credibility to the story. So that is one area where it's like, hey, you know what? It traded 97 million shares today, and that's just off the chart, So it's like, okay, so it's okay to throw a little bit of money at that because it may be right. They may have a mousetrap that really goes, and you don't want to miss out on that if it becomes a 10-bagger. At the same time, these things, they always have to capitalize themselves heavily to get where they need to be. So there's always a dilution story here behind it as well.
On the air live with Brian Perry. Certainly, we salute that tremendous achievement, and we'll be watching that one for sure. Also watching the cryptos, which had gotten quite a lift lately, and looks like Bitcoin pulling back here now, heading into the weekend. Some money coming off the table here, with Bitcoin hovering just below 51K now, down about 400 or so. What about the action you've observed in the crypto world this week?
Well, in the technical world, what was resistance now becomes support. So when you blow through resistance, which was 47,000 on Bitcoin, and you go up to 52, 53,000, then this pullback here should probably find itself nestling around, I'm going to say 48,000 here, just above the 47.5 level, where it really, popped through there on volume. And then, those that want to be in crypto should take a hard look at that, because again, you got this, you got the fork and the fork for Bitcoin coming up here in May, which means that they're going to cut production of Bitcoin in half from 13 coins every minute to 6.5, and that becomes a more restrictive supply. And so therefore, and I've noted this before, that there's probably 3 or 4 million Bitcoin missing from the market altogether. So you've got a market here that is tight supply. It's a storehouse of wealth. It's the alternative to gold, and it gives people a chance here to buy the dip on something like this, where it looks as if you've got the blessing of Wall Street now, because of all these spot Bitcoin ETFs are trading, and so therefore you don't have this overhang of regulatory concern and fear of all that. So despite all the narrative against the Bitcoin and Ethereum trade, there seems to be upward momentum here if you buy the dips properly here. This is like a stair-step type of a chart here. The stock broke out, made a big move here. You get a nice retracement back to a breakout, and I think you have a shot here to buy Bitcoin around 48,000 here in the next week. And again, you don't really bet the ranch on this, Frank, but it's one it's proven itself out to be a real winner here longer term.
On the air live with investment expert Brian Perry. At this point, Brian, given the Dow and the S&P 500 at record highs and the Nasdaq kissing record highs today, where are you putting money now and/or taking it off the table?
Well, you saw a lot of money going into financials here, but not banks, kind of non-bank financials here. So, bear in mind that there's other things to do in the financial sector other than the banks. There's companies like Morningstar, MORN. There's BlackRock, BLK, the biggest ETF trade in the world. There's Visa. There's MasterCard. Which dominate that space right now. They're breaking out. You've got M&A activity here taking place here. You've got mergers and acquisitions. You got Capital One buying Discovery Financial for $35 billion. That's great. That's great pin action for the market right now. You've got also like Diamondback Resources here, which is buying the largest privately held oil and gas producer in all of the Permian Basin, Endeavor, for $26 billion. Again, another really strong move here. So look at FANG, F-A-N-G, which is Diamondback Resources on any weakness right now, because they're going to dominate that part of that space here. With AI being as it is here, there's certain things to do that are non-Mag 7 plays, Frank, like Palantir, Palantir PTLR, which is more in the cybersecurity AI space is a combo type of a play, but it popped to like 25.5. It's back in here around 22. That's a company that's under heavy accumulation right now. So I like that as well. And then certainly I would rename the Mag 7 into kind of more of a Super 7, where certainly NVIDIA, Microsoft, and Meta occupy the top 3 spaces, but also Super Microcomputer here. They launched a $1.35 billion convertible bond deal today. The stock was down $129, but it's up from $300 to $900 here in the last month and a half, and that's pulling back. So they make the servers for NVIDIA chips, and so SMCI is a big long-term winner here. Buy that on a pullback here. ServiceNow is a big name. Salesforce is the other one, and then Applied Materials make up this new collection of 7 names here that I think are going to replace the Mag 7 in terms of going forward. For those that want to take a play here on the small cap world, you can leverage the Russell 2000 by buying the Direxion Small Cap Bull. It's a 3 times leverage ETF on the Russell 2000 here. The symbol is TNA, as in Tango, November Alpha, and it trades around $37.50. That was trading at $110 here just 2 or 3 years ago. So you have a launch pad type play there if the Russell does take off. And then beyond that, we had some good numbers out of Rocket Mortgage here. They own formerly, they're Quicken Loans, the largest in the country. The stock's trading just under 12 here. Good numbers here. And then Disney here is pulling back off that big earnings pop. It was on 113, now it's 106, and it looks like consolidating here 107 here. You may get 105 under 105 here. That looks like a good buy down there. And then certainly coming off here, just I took a trade on Square today, which is now Block, and that's the former Square. That was up big today on where forward guidance here was strong, but it's a very whippy stock, and I think you trade that one as opposed to own it. So that's what I was doing.
Breeds heavily also.
Yes, it does.
I like that expression. Very good, Brian. Well, you're terrific, and thank you so much for that terrific assessment and analysis of what happened in this epic week with the Magnificent One, NVIDIA, taking the spotlight, leading the AI parade as well as the LA parade higher. Brian, thank you very much for joining us live here. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you do the same, Frank. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. That is investment expert Brian Perry, Chief Investment Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Mint Asset Management at mintassetmanagement.com, and author of The 25% Cash Machine, which got cranked up this week. Right now, out to the freeways we go here on 790 KBC. Folks, people like you and me have our ear to the ground in all things business. We like to be informed and well prepared, and as important as finance is, I want you to have a plan in case you're hit by someone not paying attention to the road. Thinking ahead serves us well, and even still, we can get caught off guard as people are so focused on their destination that they might not have a plan if they're in an accident that's not their fault. That's why I encourage you to put my friend Attorney Clark Fielding's number in your phone. That number is 833-88-SHARK. So if you're hurt in an accident, you'll be ready with your strategy to make Clark Fielding your very first call. Fielding Law aims for the highest possible settlements, considering you might need long-term care, rehab, compensation for lost wages, and any ongoing physical or emotional pain. So if you're hurt in any kind of accident, call for a free consultation with Fielding Law. You can trust them. They're honest, respected, and your strategy in case you get into that unexpected accident. Motorcycle, truck, pedestrian, scooter, hit and run, boating, or bike accidents, you name it. The number to call, 833-88-SHARK. That's 833-88-SHARK. Or go to clarkthesharklaw.com. 790 KBC welcomes James Taylor coming to the Hollywood Bowl on May 29th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. And right now, caller 9 wins at 1-888-795-2222. You can get a pair of tickets to the show. Call a friend and call this number, 888-795-2222. Your friend's right here. Caller 9 wins to get a pair of tickets to the James Taylor Show coming to the Hollywood Bowl on May 29th. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KBC. Winning week on Wall Street. Record-shattering week, as a matter of fact, with the Dow moving up 62 points to a record-high close to close out this holiday-shortened week. We started the week with the President's Day on Monday, so here it is Friday already at a record high, 39,131. The S&P 500 up 2 at 5,089, a record high. The NASDAQ kissed record highs today during the session above 16K, but closed down 45 points at 15,997. The price of gold of $1,510 to $2,045.80 an ounce. Oil pulling back from its high point of the year, down about $2.76 and change. NVIDIA, the Magnificent One this week on its earnings news. Very impressive. In fact, the stock's up 238% over the past 12 months and had that enormous rise in market cap coming out on that earnings report this week. And that $277 billion gain in its market cap sent NVIDIA value higher than the GDP of most big countries. NVIDIA shares up another 279 to a record high 788.17 at the close. Bitcoin down about 400 now at 50,734. Ethereum down 17 at 29.25, and Doge at 8 cents. And now the latest news for you here in 790 KBC. Some breaking news here. A jury has found socialite Rebecca Grossman guilty of murder in that 2020 crash in Westlake Village that left 2 young brothers dead. This is a heartbreaking story. A verdict has been reached, and indeed, a jury has found Rebecca Grossman guilty in the crash which killed 2 young brothers back in 2020. 790 KBC News Department will have more coming up at the top of the hour. What are the U.S. Senate candidates here in California going to do about crime and homelessness? Let's bring in one of those candidates right now, and that is Christina Pascucci, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, journalist, humanitarian, Southern California, pilot, expectant mom, and candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat previously held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. Christina, good afternoon to you.
Hi.
Thank you very much for coming to the line here. A lot to talk about, and you're on the campaign trail right now. You've been throughout the state lately, right, in Northern California as well as Southern California. And crime, obviously, top of mind, certainly among business people. Tell us about your message out there.
Hey, Frank, so good to be with you. Thank you so much for having me. I can't believe we're getting down to the wire here. And yeah, I was in San Francisco last week. I've been traversing the state, listening to Californians, which I'm very passionate about. I think our leaders don't do enough of that. And I mean, what we've been reporting on, or what you've been reporting on, what I had been reporting on as a journalist prior to entering this race is that crime continues to plague California. And especially when it comes to that retail theft we've talked about, businesses are feeling it. In San Francisco, they are struggling. And I went to the Tenderloin district. It's almost unrecognizable still. And it's so painful to see the level of human suffering and the policies that are enabling this. But what was very heartening about it is that I do think we're starting to see the tide turn, because people are sick of what the state of affairs is and the status quo. And what I mean specifically by that is, one thing I saw that I thought was very interesting was when it comes to the homelessness situation, the Salvation Army, for example, they're starting to do things differently. Before, there were harm reduction policies that were kind of the way in which to do things, essentially that allowed the homeless or unhoused people to use drugs in shelters. And now the Salvation Army is saying that's clearly not helping people. You have to focus on recovery, and that's the only way we're going to put a dent in this crisis that's plaguing the state.
On the air live with Christina Pascucci, candidate for the U.S. Senate seat here in California. And let me ask you about this. This is something that I talked about with the L.A. County DA candidates at a big forum recently. You have stores being taken over with the smash and grabs and shoplifting up 81%. You have intersections being taken over. You have entire buildings being taken over. Now look at what happened there in downtown Los Angeles with that graffiti tower there right in the heart of the city. Criminals running rampant. What would you do to turn this around?
I think there's short and long-term solutions. In the short term, we do need to look at revamping some of these policies. I've talked about how we have to repeal or amend Prop 47, which allows for repeat offenders with no consequences. That's just common sense. Then there's a long-term approach. All of these issues that we are facing right now, the biggest issues, like when it comes to education and crime and homelessness and mass incarceration, all these things are interrelated. And when you look at cities like Oakland, for example, or San Bernardino that have some of the highest crime rates in the entire state of California, something else they have in common is they're amongst the highest dropout rates. In Oakland, they have a 22% high school dropout rate for Oakland Unified. That is quadruple the national average. And so clearly there is a link there, and we have to get back to basics where we're bringing back common sense to how we lead and how we run our state and support children with quality education, making sure they're reading at grade level by third grade, making sure that people feel safe in their communities. These are just things that, you know, any thriving society needs to have, and we've completely left a long time ago in the interest of pushing forward agendas that don't actually help people.
And, of course, anyone can become a victim of crime. Even your own mom was a victim of crime in the past year, right?
Yeah, she was robbed at Costco. She's doing good. She was, the Chilean gangs, they fly in, they commit their crime, they fly out. It's hard to catch them. And that's something we'd seen an uptick in different parts of Los Angeles and Ventura County. And she was a victim of that. They robbed her in the middle of the day in Costco, and my home was burglarized. My car was stolen from a secure garage and involved in a high-speed chase. And so, you know, there's some people who try to say crime is going down, but I think people feel it everywhere that is actually not true. And the first step in solving a problem is you have to acknowledge it exists.
And Christina, tell us about your experience in this whole process. Of course, people know you very well from television, and now on this program, radio too. So we appreciate that. But tell us about your experience getting cut out of the debates and the mess up with the ballot and so forth here.
Thank you. Thanks for asking about that. It has been such an amazing journey, just getting to speak directly to the people of California throughout this race and knowing that our message is resonating so deeply. And that being said, there have been forces at play that have prevented us from having a megaphone and being heard at the level we'd like. One of them, when Fox Politico hosted that first debate at USC, and you had 3 polling candidates who pulled a collective 20%, who were myself, a more moderate candidate, and then 2 Republicans. All of us were excluded. And it's interesting because that was the first U.S. Senate debate. They only had 4 candidates instead of what would have been 7 if they included us on stage. And in the weeks and months since, you've seen the 3rd round or 4th round of these DA debates with 10 people on stage. And so I think what's important moving forward is that the voters' voices deserve to be heard, and they should know and have an opportunity to hear from the diverse voices of the candidates who are running. That's such an important pillar of our democracy and an important obligation that our press has to make sure that voters are understanding their options and that the media is not choosing the options for them by deciding who the 4 front runners should be.
Terrific, Christine. I wish we had more time, but we'll have to stop there. We wish you all the best, and thank you again very much for coming to the line. That is Christina Pascucci, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, humanitarian, a Southern Californian, a pilot, expectant mom, and candidate for the California U.S. Senate seat previously held by the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. Christina, thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Appreciate you, Frank.
Thank you very much, and right out to the freeways now, 790 KABC. Mottek On Money continues here in 790 KABC. Some state lawmakers in Sacramento are working now to essentially legalize racial discrimination here in California, despite the passage back in 1997 of Proposition 209, which says the state shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any person or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment, public education, or public contracting. Something called Assembly Constitutional Amendment Number 7 is now being considered. Let's bring in attorney Jack Brown now, an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation. Jack Brown, thanks very much for taking the call. Take it from the top and tell us what we need to know about this.
Well, thanks very much for having me on. The supporters of racial discrimination have a number of times attempted to repeal Prop 209. And ACA 7 is kind of the latest attempt to do so. It's a little bit more subtle than previous attempts in the sense that it doesn't outright repeal Prop 209, but it does create a massive exception to it that would effectively render Prop 209 a nullity and would effectively allow the California government to discriminate on the basis of race with the stroke of a pen. It's deeply disturbing.
So how does this work with this this method here that somebody's trying to use there in Sacramento to circumvent the will of the voters that occurred back in 97, the passage of Prop 209, this Assembly Constitutional Amendment? How does this work?
So the way that it works is that it allows state agencies to create programs for specific groups based on protected characteristics like race, color, ethnicity, national origin, and sex, as long as the programs are, quote, research-based or research-informed, and they're approved by the governor. And that's really problematic for 2 reasons. One, people shouldn't be subject to racial discrimination just because there are statistics that show a disparity between 2 different groups, and that's even if the statistics are good. Research fraud and research dishonesty are certainly problems in academia and can just as easily happen in a study commissioned by a government agency. And it also allows the governor of California to create exceptions to this key constitutional right on the stroke of a pen. It would allow any governor, Republican or Democrat, to provide benefits to a preferred racial group, and that completely undermines the entire purpose of Prop 209. Prop 209 exists so that Californians can enjoy equal protection of laws and be free from discrimination in public employment, public education, or contracting. And they can't be said to enjoy that right if the governor can unilaterally waive that right.
And as you recently written, you said ACA 7 is no mere exception to Prop 209. It drives a freight train through its heart, rendering equality for all Californians a nullity. So it's pretty serious. So what's the next step in this process, and what should we be looking out for here?
So unfortunately, the California Assembly passed ACA 7, so it's now going to the Senate for to be voted on there. I referred to the Senate Rules Committee, and from there it's going to work its way through the committee process, and if it doesn't die there, then it'll come before a vote for the full Senate. So, hopefully, I think that the ACA 7 should die in the Senate because, again, it would render this key constitutional right for all Americans, or for all Californians, rather, if it's the state constitutional provision, a nullity.
I'm surprised this isn't getting more attention.
I'm surprised as well, but people are starting to wake up to how serious the problem is. There are groups like my own firm, Pacific Legal Foundation, who are opposed to it, along with other groups like the Californians for Equal Rights Foundation, who are taking a stand against this kind of discrimination, and we hope to see ACA 7 stopped.
All right. When is the Senate going to take this up? Is it on the calendar, or what's the process there?
It doesn't appear to have been scheduled yet, but certainly we at PLF will be watching it very, very closely, and we'll continue doing our best to help Californians fight for their right to be free from discrimination.
Certainly. Anything else on your radar screen that the public might not be aware of that you're following closely?
Well, we at PLF are always interested in issues, whether in California or elsewhere, dealing with restrictions on people's rights to pursue economic opportunity and be free from discrimination based on the basis of race or sex. So if you're dealing with an issue in your in your city or town or from your state, please do reach out to us. We have an intake form on our website, www.pacificlegal.org, and we'd be very, very interested in helping you fight for your rights.
Jack Brown, an attorney with the Pacific Legal Foundation, a public interest law firm that defends Americans, especially Californians, against government overreach. Thank you very much for joining us live here this afternoon.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Jack Brown. Live with us here on Mottek On Money on 790 KABC. A record-shattering week on Wall Street, recapping the action here. The Dow at a record high to close out the week at 39,131 after a bounce of 62 points. The S&P 500 has ended the week at an all-time high at 5,089, up 2 points today. The Nasdaq kissing new highs today, but closed lower, down 45 to 15,997. Stay tuned now for the 790 KBC News Blitz with Randy Wang, and tune in again Monday at 4 for Mottek On Money on 790 KBC.
The Ed Milet Show showcases the greatest peak performers sharing their journey, knowledge, and thought leadership.
This is one of the all-time best pieces of advice ever given on the show.
Author and coach Tony Robbins.
You don't experience life. You experience the life you focus on.
Singer Jason Derulo.
My happiest moments have always been in the grind.
Singer Jewel.
I think healing is a gritty job. It's you looking in the mirror and going, what do I got? No one's coming for me. I'm coming for me.
The Ed Milet Show is available on YouTube or wherever you listen.